for having me. Thank you for the invitation and the time to be with all of you tonight. I was asked to prepare a presentation that I would share with everyone. And, the subject that I speak on with the most expertise is risk management, which is applicable to dentists wherever you are. And I realize we have specialists, we have general dentists, and that you're all over. My understanding is that you're all over the country, not just in Texas where I am. So that's very interesting to me. And so I hope everything is well where you are. I'll go ahead and share my screen now. And yes, at the end, we'll come back. If you have any questions as we go along, I'm just going to talk straight through the presentation and then write down your questions that you want to ask me as we go along, and I'll take the questions at the end. So I look forward to doing that as well. So the name of this presentation is called Predictable Compliance. And I say predictable because what I've learned over the last 20 plus years, 25, 27 years of law practice representing dentists, particularly in state board matters, is that there are, across almost 100% of every case I've ever handled over the last 27 years, you can imagine how many that may be, there's very, very common items that arise in a complaint, in a patient complaint, in a dental board matter, that from case to case to case to case, you see the same things over and over. And it's not because dentists practice with each other. They're dentists that don't even know each other. And just extrapolate that over the amount of time that I've been in law practice representing dentists before the state board here in Texas, and to continue to see these same violations over and over. And so what I try to teach, what I try to educate about, particularly in a risk management course, is let's learn to take care of the things that are relatively straightforward and perhaps see them from a different perspective, and involve our team members to understand why it's important to all be on the same page when it comes to these items. And when you have educated yourself on the very common things that I'm going to talk about tonight, and you get your team on the same page, then not only are you going to be in compliance, but you can have confidence that it's predictable compliance, that you have confidence that as you go into your office each day, and as you go into each operatory, and as you treat each patient, and as you engage, that your systems are set up in such a way that the outcome with respect to risk management is predictable, that the responses of yourself and your team members are predictable with respect to whether or not you're in risk management compliance. So with that, we'll go ahead and get into the presentation. So tonight, as I've been saying, give me 1 second here. Here we go. So it's the legal considerations in the delivery of dental patient, in the delivery of dental treatment. And first, I just want to talk about the nature of risk. And the nature of risk is very, very straightforward. I call it Murphy's Law. I think everybody here should be familiar with Murphy's Law. A loose way of saying it is that if something can go wrong, it will, right? Murphy's Law. If something can go wrong, it will. And when you apply that to dental practice and you examine that across your own experience in dental practice from the time you were in dental school, did dental school go perfectly? Has your dental practice each and every day gone perfectly? Or have there just been those days where if something could have gone wrong, it did, right? And so you couple that with the other component of dental practice. You don't practice dentistry in a vacuum. You don't practice dentistry on a mannequin. You practice dentistry on people, and people are people. And it's not just your patients that are there contributing to your day and your practice. It's your team members as well. And so you've got yourself, your patients, team members, you've got Murphy's Law hovering about. And so when you combine these things, in my mind, that's the simplest way to basically say each and every time you go into the office, there's going to be risk because it's just inherent in what we do. And then when things do go wrong, it gets even more exacerbated if a patient complains about whatever that thing was that went wrong in your office. And now you've invited more people, a regulatory board, attorneys. It could be a negligence case on the civil side. It could be regulatory with the dental board. It gets even more complicated. It's what we're trying to avoid. We're trying to hold off Murphy's Law. We're trying to work the best we can with people, and we're trying to avoid the dental board and everything that involves. The goal is for implementation of the appropriate changes and systems in day-to-day practice to ensure regulatory compliance with your state's rules and laws. Now, I'm going to warn everyone up front, my example tonight, because I'm in Texas, I'm going to be talking about some Texas laws. And I'll get to that in a moment. But the goal here is for you to think about, well, that's what's going on with Boyd and his clients in Texas, with dentists in Texas. And if you're in Texas and you're on tonight, then you'll be familiar with my examples. But if you're not, I'm confident that there's very, very similar state laws in your state, because at one point I had the opportunity to compare from state to state, and it's amazing how similar the state laws are from state to state. So once again, this presentation is designed for dental practitioners, all of you, to gain a greater understanding of the rules and regulations in your respective jurisdictions where you are, that address and regulate two areas primarily, because this is where your dental practice lives. This is where you have to focus on risk management. And if you focus on risk management in just these two areas, it decreases the likelihood substantially and greatly of you having either some type of regulatory complaint or some type of civil action for negligence. And let me be clear about that. Compliance with state regulatory laws with respect to your license and the rules that apply to your license in the treatment of patients, compliance with those laws will work greatly to ensure that you will not suffer any sort of negligence claim, at least related to the areas of your practice that are regulated. Certainly, if you commit negligence, that's something else, and we're always on the lookout to provide the best care. But understanding your state law and the regulatory law decreases greatly the likelihood of compliance violations as well as negligence claims. We're going to be looking at the standard of care. Standard of care is defined by case law and by statute. Put simply, standard of care is most often referred to by the legal phrase, what a reasonable and prudent dentist would do under the same or similar circumstances. Okay, so who is the reasonable prudent dentist? If you are the reasonable and prudent dentist, raise your hand. The reality is that this is a legal standard. It's a legal phrase that's applied to each and every dentist in the circumstance that they found themselves in. And the question is, based on the knowledge, expertise, and education as it applies to the profession, what would a reasonable and prudent dentist do under the same or similar circumstances? In other words, what should have been done versus what was done, and was that therefore within the standard of care? That's the basic analysis. The other thing that goes a long way, which is hugely important for your day-to-day practice to remain in compliance and to avoid claims, is record keeping. And in Texas and other jurisdictions, record keeping is not only something that's outlined in the statutory law, but it's also considered and part of the definition for standard of care. In other words, your record keeping is what you write down in the patient record, but it's considered equivalent with the standard of care of treatment, because the writing down of the treatment you provide in and of itself is so integral to the treatment itself that when you communicate what treatment you've provided, then that's considered part of the standard of care as well. So understand the relationship between record keeping and standard of care. Record keeping is the view into your office that you control. And the law will tell you what is expected if someone wants to look in. So what this means is that what your records reflect, what your records state about the treatment that's been provided, that's the only way that a board member, the patient themselves, another attorney, another dentist, most importantly, is going to know the history of treatment for any particular patient, is what you and your staff write down in the dental record as to what happened at each appointment. And that's how it becomes the view into your office, the window into your office to see what happened with any particular patient. The only way to see what happened at any particular time with any particular patient on any particular day is the window you provide through your record keeping. And the law tells you what's expected. The law states this is what we expect to see in the dental records. And so that's the good news, is that it's not a secret what's supposed to be written down in your dental records. It's the law tells you exactly what is supposed to be there. So again, record keeping is the view into your office that you control. You decide how much or how little. The law tells you how much is supposed to be there. You decide if you're going to comply with that. And you also decide, are we going to abbreviate? How are we going to, what phrases are we going to use? How much of our conversations are we going to include? There's so much decision-making that goes into the control of what's recorded. And you, the practitioner, you set the pace, you set the tone, you set the lead for how your staff and your team members are going to follow you with respect to this very, very important component of dental practice. So how a risk is responded to is important. And must be analyzed in order to eliminate, mitigate, or minimize exposure. Can you eliminate all risk? Most likely not. Can you mitigate or minimize your exposure to risk? Certainly you can do that. It's all about risk management and getting your team on the same page so that you have what I've titled this presentation to be predictable compliance. So again, I want to take a look at the law. Understanding the law is the starting point for managing risk. I hope that it's not true, but it may be that the last time that you looked at the law that applies to your license might have been at the time of dental school graduation and during the process of licensure. And I hope that's not true. I hope that you keep track of what's going on with respect to the laws in your particular jurisdictions through any type of publications and media, either by your state board, local dental societies, local dental associations, who help and assist in keeping track of these things, of these laws. But knowing and having access to the law that regulates your license is very important, because as situations arise in your office, you're going to want to know where to find the answer to questions about legal situations that arise. And for example, in Texas, you can access the Dental Practice Act as well as the state board rules, both of which regulate the practice of dentistry in Texas. Those laws are available online. We're going to be taking a peek at locating that law to show how easy it is, and then look at the two rules that apply to record keeping as well as to the standard of care in Texas. And I have to use the Texas example because that's where I'm licensed. That's where all of my experience is. But as I was saying a few moments ago, the different states have very, very similar law applications, particularly when it comes to record keeping, standard of care. Many jurisdictions have borrowed from each other and use almost the identical language in their rules from state to state to state across the United States. So bear that in mind. You know, when you're looking for the rules, as I said a moment ago, ours in Texas is easily found on the state board website. I know from experience, I know from looking at other jurisdictions that I was able to find all of the laws of the other states by doing the same thing. So whatever jurisdiction you're in, whatever state that you're in, I know for a fact that you, just like in Texas, you can go to your state board's website and find the laws and rules that apply to your license. It's important to keep track and to bookmark and visit these state board websites from time to time, because there will be information there that's helpful to you in your day-to-day practice, particularly with rule compliance. As you can see, I've pointed out here in Texas, they keep a link available that shows and tells you recent rule adoptions. You know, they track the most recent over the past year so that doctors are made aware of rule changes that just pop up without notice, but you can find those rule changes on the state board website. We're going to be looking at standard of care as well as records of the dentist in our example. And this particular slide just shows that in the red lettering down there, rules are often amended. So it's not only important to keep track of the rules, but also to keep track of the recent rule adoptions, and also to keep track of, and it's always good to notice, well, if this is a recent rule adoption, but this was a rule that was in effect before, this must have been amended. And understanding the timeline of certain rules can be very, very important. So in Texas, our rule for standard of care is Rule 108.7. And the language of that rule, like I said, uses this common phrase that's used in the law to describe standard of care. The rule starts out, each dentist shall in a manner consistent with that of a reasonable and prudent dentist under the same or similar circumstances, first of all, maintain patient records that meet the requirements of the next rule we're going to look at that has to do with record keeping. So right off the bat, the standard of care regulation in Texas said defines standard of care as reasonable and prudent dentist under same or similar circumstances. And item number 2 is the very first thing that they say is within the standard of care is maintaining patient records. So you see the relationship of standard of care to patient records is that they're connected. Okay, and it's the very first thing that is within the standard of care is not the care itself, but the maintenance of patient records that records that care. That's how important record keeping is. In Texas, a medical history and a limited physical evaluation, which is blood pressure and pulse, is required. It tells you that a medical history can include, and you can include a checklist for consistency, but everyone that here should know what a medical history is. And certainly you should be getting blood pressure and pulse. In Texas, it's required by this rule. And these are the items right here, the medical history, the blood pressure and pulse. It's the first thing the board looks for in a complaint when they review records. And it's the medical history, the blood pressure and pulse are the most violated rules in record keeping in all of my years of practice for 27 years. Most commonly violated rule is the blood pressure and pulse and or the medical history in some combination, believe it or not. It gives you further details on the blood pressure and pulse on every patient that's over 12 years. And these have to be obtained and reviewed at the initial appointment, which means the first appointment, as well as updated annually. Again, we're talking about Texas here. The rule goes on to talk about other requirements within the standard of care, positive pressure breathing, emergency equipment, training to dental office personnel, basic cardiac life support, adherence to generally accepted protocols and standards of care for management of complications and emergencies. And if there's ever an investigation of a complaint, the state board, because this is the rule for standard of care, in response to a complaint, dentists in Texas must prove that they have all of these items and are in compliance with Rule 108.7. So it's not to be taken lightly. This should be a checklist for your office. Whatever your state requires, do I have all of the items that are listed in your particular rule as to what this minimum standard of care and how it's defined in your particular jurisdiction? Dentists in Texas have to complete basic CPR courses within 3-year intervals. One of the third most often violated rule in Texas is this one, and it is the keeping or maintaining or including in the record a written informed consent signed by the patient. It'll either be blood pressure and pulse and or medical history and or informed consent. And I've seen cases where they were all missing from the record at different intervals in time. The most commonly violated rules, and one of them is certainly the absence of informed consent in the dental record for a particular procedure. Informed consent, I'm confident everyone on this particular Zoom webinar that you do informed consent for every procedure that you perform in your office. There should never be an instance that you're not utilizing informed consent for any type of treatment that is invasive and could cause harm to a patient. The thing about informed consent too is that it's a conversation that's best had between the doctor and the patient. Sometimes this is delegated, which can be fine, but the best practice is for the doctor to be involved in that conversation about informed consent. In Texas, we have these other items that are listed that are part of the standard of care. There's one more that's been added that I don't have, that just came out about a month ago that has to do with sedation. But Rule 108.7 online has been updated. But these are additional items that are actually part of other provisions in the rules that are considered part of the standard of care. The other rule that's very, very important, whether you're in Texas or another jurisdiction, whatever your rule is, in Texas, it's Rule 108.8, but the laws and regulations that tell you what's expected for maintaining or keeping your records for each patient, record keeping. In Texas, the very first part of this rule defines what's considered to be part of a dental record. And if you can look at what's on the screen quickly, everything that you read there is part of the dental record. And it includes your study models, cast molds. What I have in red there are things that people may not consider part of the record. Certainly, we all consider study models, but further down, dental laboratory prescriptions, billing and payment records, and appointment records are considered part of the dental record as well. So anything and everything that's generated as a result of treating a patient basically is considered part of the record keeping. And so these rules apply to each component of the record. In Texas, Texas dentists are required to maintain an adequate dental record for each dental patient for reference, identification, and protection of the patient and the dentist. And that's an important point. Dental records not only protect the patient, but it protects you as well. If a patient complains about your treatment or complains about anything about their experience in your office, you control what goes in that record. That's how you protect yourself. And when you're in compliance with the rules and your perspective is, I'm keeping the best record I can to protect myself, you have a heightened sense of what it is that you want to record in those records. Excuse me. You can see there at the bottom, it says records must include documentation of the following. In Texas, the records must include documentation of the following, and I'm confident that these items are required in records in any jurisdiction across the United States. The patient's name, date of visit, reason for visit, and vital signs, blood pressure, and pulse, which was mentioned in the standard of care rule that we just looked at. So you can see how standard of care and record keeping, again, both rules cross-reference each other. And the vital signs, blood pressure, and pulse are considered required to be in each dental record. In 108.7 in Texas tells you how often, right? With the initial appointment and then annually. And as often as a reasonable and prudent dentist would do so. Records must include certainly the medical history, the blood pressure and pulse, the findings of your clinical and radiographic examination, the radiographs, all of the things that you would expect to be in a record. It's really about the amount of detail that you're going to provide. The tactile and visual examination of soft and hard tissues is essentially what we refer to as an oral cancer screening, but there needs to be documentation that this was performed, okay? Whether you found something or not, whether it revealed anything in that examination or not, but to state that you did the examination is critical. And certainly records, and this is what I was saying, you control the records and what they say, but the rules and regulations tell you what's expected to be in the records. It's a checklist. Records should include what we just looked at, right? The patient's name, date of visit, reason for visit, vital signs, medical history, blood pressure and pulse, the clinical and radiographic examination, the oral cancer screening, and then the diagnosis from all of the information that's been gathered in those previous items. Now, diagnosis, treatment plan, treatment provided, medication, complications, informed consent, covered in the previous rule, prescriptions, controlled substances if applicable, and then identification of the dentist providing treatment. In our jurisdiction, you must, if you for some reason don't have any of these items required, you have to give an explanation for why they're not there. And then if you don't give that explanation, that's an additional violation. Okay. Very, very important to understand the rules because of all of the detail that's required in the record keeping. But the good news is they're telling you what they expect, which is why you want to know it, study it, make sure that your team is on the same page and understands it. So now we're going to take a look at some a brief case study just to analyze some records together and see if we see any items that are either good or bad about these records. I'm not saying that the record I'm about to show you is ideal. I'm not going to say it's the worst I've ever seen. I'm not going to say that it's 100% the best record I've ever seen, or that there's problems or not. We'll just take a look at this record and see what we think of it. So this is a very, very basic one-page, split down the middle page of a very, very basic record, hard copy, not digital, old school record from, it looks like 2007, where a patient came in and this was presented to them to fill out. It says that they last visited the dentist in January of 2007. The signature on the bottom right says that the date that this was filled out was in February of 2007. So it looks like they had gone to a previous dentist as just, 4 to 6 weeks prior to this visit. And the question there, what was done at that time? A cleaning. Did you make regular visits to the dentist before then? Yes. Are you aware of a dental problem? It says yes. And then it says explain their item number 3, top left, and it's left blank. And so if you, the doctor, or your assistant is going through this in detail and you see that there's a blank and they've checked off, are you aware of a dental problem? This would be their chief complaint, right? And they've left the blank for an explanation. Nothing's written there. that's an opportunity to write that in at this place. Now, you might write it in the progress notes, but out of a sense of completion, depending on how things are going, either have the patient completely fill it out or you write it in as you're reviewing this with the patient. You read on down, talking about gums bleeding, gum disease, gum surgery, etc. Patient checks no. Are your teeth sensitive to any of these? No. There's several boxes here that are unchecked. And so it's almost as if from number 3 down, you don't know whether the patient has read any of this because there's no answer to the yes or no questions. And so in my mind, it's an incomplete record. Is it in violation of the law? No. Is it something that you want to complete because it might make a difference later to you, the doctor, because records are to help protect you? Yes, you want your records to be complete. This is the part of the record that certainly can be delegated so that by the time the doctor reviews the record, it's been completed so that it makes it easier for the doctor to meet with the patient. So we took a look at that. We took a look at this. Over here on the top right, when was your last physical examination? 2 months ago. Are you now under the care of a physician? And it says yes. Well, if they're under the care of a physician, that's another opportunity to learn, well, what type of care is this physician currently providing? List all medications or drugs. At least if there's none, at least fill in the blank that there are none. Do you smoke? No. Do you use smokeless tobacco? Do you drink? No. And then it gets into essentially the checklist of the health history, and they check that they have high or low blood pressure. They answer yes to that question, but they don't say which one, high or low. They don't circle high or circle low. They just say yes to the question. And so again, the doctor missed the opportunity, or their staff or both missed the opportunity to get some important details of exactly what type of blood pressure problems that this particular patient has. And that could certainly affect treatment, and treatment could affect this patient based on this information going forward. So that's a huge miss right there, to not get more detail about the high or low blood pressure. And if you recall, when they were asked up above about seeing a physician, there was no further information. So it would be best to say, well, is it high or low blood pressure? And are you on medications or drugs? And connect those two from number 4 to that answer here under number 9. They checked yes on thyroid. They checked yes on liver disease, hepatitis. Have you had surgery, kidney stones in pregnancy? Have you ever been given blood? Yes. And so on. So not the most ideal completion of that record on the part of the dentist and their staff here. And yet, as you look at this, it looks like any other dental record you may have seen in your practice over the years, but when you analyze it more closely, you see where there's problems. This is the progress notes much later for the same patient. Now we're in 2013. They have blood pressure and pulse. They have the blood pressure here, pulse here. It appears that it was signed off by the doctor, so there's compliance with that part of the rule. Chief complaint, there's a broken tooth and the patient's going on a vacation in 4 weeks. Clinically, they see that tooth number 5 has a buccal something, buccal cusp fracture, x-ray. obscured apex, but no obvious radiolucencies, diagnosis of coronal fracture, treatment plan, build up with a crown. So that was the assessment. And you would think that this would all be in compliance with the record keeping because you've got the chief complaint, what the x-ray revealed, the diagnosis, the treatment, you've got blood pressure and pulse, it's signed off by the doctor, it's dated, everything looks good on this record. So on the top half, I'm very happy. On the bottom half, the only thing that makes me not happy on the bottom half is that this is a pre-printed form that's fill in the blank. Now, I understand that time is money, and this is an effort to have the greatest amount of efficiency, as well as basically a checklist to make sure we don't miss any of these items. And I get it. I understand. From that perspective, it's great that this doctor has this checklist. The problem I've seen over the years is when things go unchecked, that it becomes so commonplace to use this format that you see here on the bottom. And when blanks go unfilled or incorrectly filled, it can lead to problems. So, people, we're not perfect. And it's just depending on what system you use and how you're going to utilize that system, it all has to be reflected against what the board rules in your particular state require. And are you doing the best to stay within compliance? Sorry. So we took a look at this record. We saw some good things. We saw some not so great things. Not the most ideal record. But probably the most glaring problem in this particular record, in my mind, was the informed consent. This is not informed consent. Just because it's titled informed consent, you can look at how brief that is. And it can never be a full discussion of any type of treatment. We know from the previous record that the diagnosis and treatment plan was a buildup and crown. And yet in this particular record, there was no informed consent specifically for crown and bridge, right? And so you can read this and you see how generalized it is. And then it leaves this long blank, and yet that blank could never be long enough really to explain the risks and hazards associated with crown and bridge. In fact, if you say, I understand that no guarantees of specific outcome are possible and agree to the concept and treatment procedures of the following crown and bridge procedure, tooth number 5, all you're saying is that the doctor discussed advantages and disadvantages and the risks, and they're signing off, and you might be able to defend that, but this really is not informed consent. It's just a piece of paper that is titled informed consent, but this is not informed consent. And I'm confident that if a patient complained that they did not receive informed consent and the doctor said, well, you signed off on this, I am confident that I probably wouldn't be able to defend this. That's how bad this informed consent is. So make sure your informed consent forms not only say informed consent at the top, but has information that makes it actual informed consent, excuse me, for your patients. Excuse me. So applying what we've learned, what could be done differently? How could that record be better? How could your record keeping and your compliance with the standard of care be better? Like we said in the beginning, the first place to start is know the law, right? Know the rules and regulations, know what they're telling you of what the expectations are for your records. And then once you know the law, educate your staff, get on the same page. Basically, in my mind, have the staff know the record keeping rules even better than you do. Predictable compliance. How is your record keeping? Records can be reviewed at each recall appointment, at each next appointment. Is there anything missing that needs to be brought up to date? Review each of your records as your patients come back through. Certainly create the best record possible with each new patient. Informed consent. Informed consent, where do we get informed consent forms? We get them from our colleagues, we get them from our specialists. There's certainly informed consent forms available online. There's no lack of resources for getting all of the informed consent forms that you need. So now, what about the conversation? I've worked with doctors over the years that have admitted to me that the reason they didn't have informed consent is because they did not like having that discussion with their patient. They were uncomfortable with it. And they were putting themselves at great risk of a complaint centered around no informed consent just because they felt uncomfortable having that discussion. So later after we discussed that, they later admitted to me that once they started getting into the habit of informed consent, that they became more and more comfortable, and now they used it almost as a marketing tool, in the sense that not because they were selling the treatment plan through their informed consent, but more because they realized that was a conversation that the doctor was having and getting to know the patient on a one-on-one basis and answering the question. And that was a very, very important time of communication between the two of them. So moving forward, what are our strategies? I misspelled the word strategy there. It says strategy. It should be strategy. You need to manage your risks for predictable compliance. Know the law, implement systems, and apply these systems in real time. Your homework from this presentation, everyone who's on the call, review with your staff the law pertaining to record keeping and the standard of care in your jurisdiction with your team. It's your homework to give them homework. Assign to your team the law pertaining to record keeping and standard of care in your jurisdiction. Tell them that there will be a quiz next Friday, right? That you're going to hand out a quiz and then take time to discuss how you can be better at record keeping and the standard of care regulations for your office. The other thing is that what I think is important that makes dentists even better at what they do is when they participate in the rulemaking, the lawmaking process. Again, I'm going to use Texas as the example, but in Texas, they post on the website when upcoming board meetings are going to be, so that you can go and offer testimony, offer comments, and participate in the process. And the doctors that do that actually influence what the rules in our state say and whether the rules will be passed or not. The doctors who are participating in the process actually have a say in the outcome of the laws that regulate their license. The dental board in Texas also gives other opportunities to talk about rules beforehand, but as they're contemplating the formation of rules, they invite dentists to come to stakeholder meetings, and that's another opportunity to get involved. And also, when the laws are being presented to the legislature in Texas, those laws are viewable, where you can offer public comment. You don't have to go to Austin. It can all be done online and through correspondence. The other two items either require time to go to Austin in person or to appear via online Zoom. But this particular part of the process just requires keeping track of the laws filtering through the legislature as they arise. And certainly, if you ever need help, you know, I'm certainly available to doctors that are here in Texas. And in order to contact me, this is my contact information here. You can certainly see a lot of information on my website, legaldental.com. If you're outside of Texas, there's two things about that. I've developed what's called the legaldental.com law library. And what this is a accumulation of forms, information, videos, courses, lectures about 22 to 25 different subjects, not only in risk management and rule compliance, but also in areas of business, buying and selling of practices, employment, associateships, commercial lease, anything and everything that I've done over the last 27 years, I'm trying to accumulate into this law library. And there's information there that would be helpful to anyone, regardless of what state that they're in. Another item that can be helpful to those that are outside of Texas is that every Tuesday morning, I offer a free 1 hour Q&A, which basically says show up on Tuesday mornings. We'll be online via Zoom, 7 a.m. Central Time, and for an hour, I make myself available to answer legal questions of whoever's there online on the call with me. And I would invite everyone here that's on the call to participate in that at least once, but as often as you like. You go to legaldental.com, my website, and the information is there. It's a recurring Zoom link that will allow you to log in every Tuesday morning at 7 a.m. Central Time to spend an hour, not only hearing from me to answer questions, but there are many times so far there's been information shared by the other doctors that are online about things that they do in their practice that is helpful to those who may be asking questions. So it's a really, really productive, good time of sharing and information. And I invite all of you to participate. So that's my presentation on predictable compliance, and I appreciate all of you staying on for it. And so now I would say that I'm available to answer your questions. If you like, you can unmute yourself and I'll listen in. And Dr. Zhang, if you're online and can assist with that. But that was my presentation. I hope it was helpful for everyone.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Shepard. Very good presentation. Yeah, I learned a lot. So I think this is the following is the Q&A time. If you doctors, if you have any question, you can ask Dr. Shepard. I have a question, Dr. Shepard. You know, I'm a foreign training dentist. You know, I just passed the board exam in California. I never been to the dental school here. So the time I practice, I don't know anything about the dental record or something like that. You know, I didn't get any training. So I just copied some the doctor who work in the same office. You know, for the first about 6 years, I'm okay because I practice in the Central Valley Central California. There is the people I think is nice. But the time I moved to the LA area, I have a lot of trouble. So I think actually, honestly, I can tell you about the couple of years ago, 6 years, I got some of the probation from the dental board because the dental record. Okay,
Mm.
I have to defend myself.
Mm.
I involve a lot of the something like that. But it's very important that you're talking about today, the dental record. In the beginning, I thought that's just the record keeping. I never pay attention to that.
Good.
But yeah, whenever we went to the court or something like that, my attorney, the verdict rate, he is very nice to me, But every time they know me, this time and I learn a lot how to do that. Even right now, I'm good because actually, honestly, I'm not, the English speaker, original English speaker, sometimes it's hard. So for this kind of situation, what do you suggest us to do the dental record,
Well, after you went through that experience and through that process, didn't you examine your record keeping more closely?
Yes, actually, they ordered me to go to the dental school for the dental record record keeping. It's very expensive. I think you know that. 4 hours cost me almost 5,000.
Wow. Well,
Yeah, that's what I learned. Those I learned, they teach me how to do the soap note, something like that.
right. Well, and then even after you learn to do it, you have to put it into practice. That's why I emphasize
Exactly.
not only you learning it, but you have to pass that knowledge on to your team because your team has such a heavy involvement in the record keeping in addition to yourself, right?
Yes. But the thing is, as a dentist, I used to have a very busy practice. It's hard for us. I think in this group, and some data is pretty busy. Do you have any suggestion we can have a good record keeping?
Well, I guess I don't understand the question in what sense. I mean,
that we are busy, but sometimes we ignore.
well, that's, I've always said it starts with you and then getting your team involved and teaching them about record keeping as well. And now everybody is promoting everybody with the importance of it. Okay. So, as far as learning it, you took a course to learn what's expected, but the compliance of that is really down to you and how it's executed in your practice with you and your team.
Mhm. Okay,
Dr.
thank you.
Schiffer, I have a question. I'm actually practicing in DFW right now. So I'm working in a corporate. Oftentimes we have a large volume of patients coming every day in our office, and that I leave a lot of blank areas like writing down the medications. Especially I'm serving lots of senior patients. So oftentimes our office will make a copy of their medications, and I'll list maybe review the medication with my patient in my note, but not listing every single ones. Is that okay saying that see the attached to the medication list in the document instead of listing every single medication in my notes?
I think it's fine to have a note that references another sheet that has the list of medications. The danger areas are your confidence that whoever was responsible for getting all of those medications on this separate sheet, that they did it, right? You don't want that to be not there. So if you have confidence in that, I have no problem with being able to defend some reference to another sheet in the record that has a complete list of the medications. I have no problem with that at all.
Okay. Another question is like the example you give to us, the the health history form. So in most of the health history forms, I noticed that because we have so many disease and conditions, it will not cover all the subjects. For example, even for diabetes, for this patient circling yes for the diabetes. I usually dive into this issue a little bit deeper. For example, I will ask, are you type 1 or type 2? What's your A1C level? And I write down those things on the medical history form as well. Is that consider the form is altered if I write it directly down on the form to do that modification?
Are you saying, is it okay that you fill it in?
No, like the patient already circled yes for diabetes, but
Yes.
I will add it on the side, type 2 and their A1C number. Will
Okay.
that consider a complete record, a valid record, or something is altered?
Oh, no, that's good. Any additional information that you can add that adds detail, it will always be considered good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Also, I've been noticing some of our patients, not in a large percentage, but at least from I see maybe 1 to 2% of a patient that receiving chemical treatment for osteoporosis, and they often use bisphosphonate, the medication, orally or IV. So that's another area that for the staff training, I told some of the staff that we need to document that to dive into the question a little bit more, because when we do a surgery, we do not want to get a jawbone necrosis, and which will cause more litigations in that case. So, do you have any suggestions on a better form that we can fill out for the patient? I know in the dental school we have different electronic record systems, so they're more complete, but it's also time consuming. Usually we take a full session, go over with the patient about their health histories and to take information from their intraoral and extraoral. And that sometimes is not a very feasible in the office.
Well, in the office where you work, are all of these forms digital?
Most of them are, but the health history form usually is a paper based.
Okay, so you have both.
Yeah.
Well, are you asking about the bisphosphonates, or are you just asking generally?
Usually the question goes like bone loss, and patient in certain demographic they don't know the words osteoporosis or anything, but they know bone loss, and they will use that bone loss to circle it, especially for my senior female patient. Yeah, and some of them will tell you more. Some of them they don't even have a clue that what the bone loss mean.
Well, this is where your progress notes are important, because there's going to be the informed consent forms and they use the words they do and describe, but then there's the conversation you have with the patient. And in situations like what you're describing, what's the most important thing is that you record that conversation and the gist of it, the main subject of those conversations in the progress notes. That's very important. Okay, so anything that isn't going to be available in any type of form, whether it's digital or paper-based, there's that part of the treatment explanation that is more detailed or more explanatory. And that's the most important thing to get down that protects you, right? That's the most important part of the record keeping that protects you, is the conversation of where you educated the patient. So you would just fill that into the progress notes.
I see. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question. Thank you so much for giving us this lecture. It's very important, I think. I have one simple question. What's the best practice for as far as blood pressure taking? Should we take a blood pressure every time when the patient comes in? Do you know any case the dentist lost the case because of they didn't take the record of blood pressure?
Okay, so I don't know what jurisdiction you're in, but I'm going to use
California.
Texas, California.
Yes.
So in Texas, the law says blood pressure and pulse at the initial appointment, which is the first appointment.
Okay.
And then the law actually says, it doesn't say and each and every appointment. What it says is as often as a reasonable and prudent dentist would do so, standard of care. And so the question is, well, how often is that? And the answer is connected to the medical status and the medical history. And patients have, you can have a patient that's in great health and just stellar health, and you can have other patients who have medical problems and are on medications. And you're going to take their blood pressure and pulse every time, whereas someone who's a world-class athlete in the best health of their life, you might not, because you don't believe you need to, because a reasonable prudent dentist can distinguish between the two types of patients. And every time I explain that to a group, there's somebody who says, yes, but why not just take it every time? And the answer is, that's great practice. Just get in the habit to where it's done each and every time, and then you never miss it, right?
Yes.
So the law doesn't require it where we are, and maybe not where you are, but if you do it every time, that's just good practice, right?
Yes. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir.
Excuse me, can I ask you a question
Yes.
about having the blood pressure? Thank you for your great lecture. It's really helpful. So is that true that each time we give patient local anesthetics, we need to take the blood pressure, even for fillings?
What state are you in?
Massachusetts.
Okay. So you'll need to check Massachusetts. Some jurisdictions require it and some do not. The general rule of thumb is informed consent should be for any treatment that's going to potentially cause harm. And there's a solid argument that local anesthetic could potentially cause harm to anyone depending on their medical status at any given moment, right?
Yeah.
And, certainly when you start to get close to exceeding the number of cartridges that are being administered based on their size and weight, right? So it's a sheet of paper, and these informed consent forms for local anesthesia are available. It's one more thing that takes an additional 5 minutes, which time is money, and it may not be required in your jurisdiction, but it may be just best practice to do it. So the answer is some jurisdictions require it, some do not. But on the other hand, if it helps protect you and the patient, it might be a good idea to do it.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Sheffer. Thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Dr. Sheffer, I have a question. I have a
Yes.
second. Okay.
Yes.
I know a lot of dental board now gradually move the dental record from a hard copy to digital copy, do you have any information for the destination of maybe state of Texas or California? Do you know how soon within maybe 5 years or maybe 10 years down the road, thinking all the record will be the digital copy instead of hard copy? Do you have any information or anything you can foresee?
I have no information on that. I'm curious about it. What's interesting to me is that in Texas, when you read the record keeping rules, it uses language that actually applies and dates back to when everybody was paper-based. And the answer that the state board gives is, well, you can extrapolate that same rule to include and to mean digital without having to change the rules. So as far as any requirement to go digital, I don't know that that would ever be required. I'd be really curious about that. But I look at it more from a legal perspective. Whether you're paper-based or digital, do you have the information that the rule requires?
Okay, I think for this moment, we can mix with a paper copy for some record, like a medical,
Yeah.
record or some, and on the examination record, we can do the digital, just combine both. Is
Yeah,
that correct? Okay.
yeah.
Okay, that's what I want to know. Thank you so much.
Hey, Dr. Shepard, this is Jesus Garcia. I have a question.
Sure, go right ahead.
Yes, so I'm Jesus Garcia. I'm an implant representative that's worked with the group and doing some training for implantology. And I work closely with Dr. Shui, who has a facility here in Houston, a training facility. We're thinking about putting together some training courses, local training courses, as well as the ones that we have with an international course that we have with the group and the university, a private university in Guatemala. When it comes to the patients, let's say we have a course here that we hold together here in these facilities in Houston, local facilities. What are the liabilities, or who'd be responsible in these three different types of scenarios? One where, let's say, the student doctor was learning to place implants, brings his patient to this facility. Number two is when, let's say, Dr. Shui, the trainer, goes to the student doctor's office and does the training there. Well, I'm talking about the actual hands-on training on a real patient. And number three would be when the student doctor would come to Dr. Shui's office and train with one of either Dr. Shui's patient, or that the student doctor would bring a patient of their own.
Well, let me ask one question. In each of those instances, is the student doctor being allowed to participate in delivering treatment?
Yes, that's the whole point. The
Yeah.
training would be that they have hands-on training, placing, there'll be a didactic component to it, but the most important part for any doctor that wants to learn how to place implants is they want to do it, hands-on training on a real patient. You can only do so much training theoretically if you work on models, or if you work on pig jaws, or even on human cadaver heads. So ideally would be that the situation, so it is easier to as we are also involved with Guatemala, because it's easier in that regard to work with patients over there. But when it comes to a situation such as here in Houston and in general in the US, what the scenarios that I described to you, what can you comment on that?
Well, I think what would be most important to me, and I'm confident that you have this, is that the patient has some form of informed consent, not only about the treatment, but some statement, whether it's separate or included, that talks about the training nature of the treatment that they're going to receive. That if Dr. Shui, with experience is going to possibly be treating, but there may be someone who is learning, and that they're basically consenting to this learning environment. And that would be applicable across all three examples.
So who would be liable ultimately?
Well, if it's being done in Dr. Shui's office, arguably there's liability with him.
Even though the other doctor may be bringing their patient.
Well, and so what's important there, and I've actually, worked with another organization that does a different area of dentistry on a similar type of situation where doctors bring in their own patients for training. And what we worked out is that there is also an agreement with respect to liability concerns and other concerns that exists between, say, Dr. Shui and then the other doctors who are there. So that can be worked out in writing ahead of time and not even involve the patient.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's very helpful.
Good.
Dr. Schiffer, I just thinking about one thing. For example, when I transit my workplace from a corporate dentistry to a private practice, how do I treat my malpractice insurance? For example, do I need to buy the tail insurance to cover the insurance right now, or I just retro cover the previous malpractice insurance by using the new insurance? I feel that part is sometimes very confusing because every single time when I move from practice to practice, it seems like I have to buy a tail insurance to cover myself. But when I start the new insurance, they will say, "Oh, we'll cover everything, before that. You don't have to buy the tail." So I usually buy the tail insurance, but I'm also debating myself, should I do it again? Because soon I will have my own startups.
Are you using the same malpractice carrier, the same company each time?
I'm not sure because so far I don't have any claim.
Well, when you purchase the insurance premium, are you purchasing it from the same company each time?
No, with if I stay with one company, yes, I will purchase the insurance through the company every time. But when
Okay.
I switch my job, I don't know what to do.
Okay, so is the company paying for your malpractice or are you
I pay
paying
for it. Yeah, I pay for it.
But so how is the company involved other than they require you to have it? They're not involved in your purchase of it.
So as a corporate dentistry, they are able to make a deal with the insurance company so they can cut your premium in certain ways.
So they, in a sense, they are providing it and then reimbursing you.
No, they are not.
Okay,
They just provide the malpractice insurance to me, but I have to pay for it.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, just cutting through it, what would eliminate all of the problems or issues when you move from one employer to the next is if you go to the insurance companies yourself, not rely on what the company, the corporate companies are making available, and just pay for your own insurance and cut the company out completely. That would eliminate these problems. So the next time you move forward, you could work with a representative and bring them up to date on your malpractice history, and you can get their advice on whether you need a tail or not. But don't use what the corporate office makes available to you. Just pay more to be in control of your own insurance.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, Dr. Schiffer. I have a question. I practice. I have a couple. I'm the owner of the practice, and I also have associates. And usually we hire associates, and we ask them to have their own malpractice insurance. And from the practice owner standpoint, it's if the malpractice happened on the associate, then as a practice owner, should we buy a separate insurance to cover the associates, or is how is the best strategy to protect the business from this point?
So you're the practice owner.
Yes.
Okay, so what I commonly see and what's workable for both the practice owner as well as the associates is what I was just describing, and that is in the contract, in your written agreement with the associate, require that they have insurance, but don't offer to pay for it. Let them get their own insurance, but just require that they have it. I don't like the provisions when the company says that you must make the dental office, the owner, a named insured, because practically what's going to happen if there's a negligence claim, the negligence claim is going to be against the providing the treating doctor. And the only way that it's going to reach all the way to the employer is if the employer had some involvement in the decision making. But the employer, you should have your own malpractice insurance as well, not only for yourself, but for your company. So it's not for the associate to name you as an insured, but both the employer or each, the employer and the associate, need to have their own independent insurance. That's my take on it. And I've seen that work out practically in real life, the way I'm describing it.
Yes, I understand, because that's a very great point, because basically we require all the associates have their own have their own the malpractice insurance. You mentioned that I should have, of course I have my own practice insurance, the malpractice insurance too. Should we tell the insurance company that we have multiple doctors under the same company, and where is the owner, and should add additional items to for the associate to get the whole practice protected?
That would be a question for them. I can't predict. For one thing, if they don't ask that question, that's on the company. But if you want to make sure you have adequate coverage, then yes, you need to share that information with the insurance company.
Oh, okay, that's fine. Maybe you should call them and discuss. Is there any special or extra the items in the policy can cover those kind of the
Right.
possible damage? Okay,
Right.
that's fine. Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a question
I
for
can
you.
maybe
The last question. So if some the other trainer and try to use our dental office and to do the training, for example, the local in North Carolina, the board just passed the the rule. The hygienists can do the injection, for the patient when they do the SRP. If I have one friend, he's a teacher in the local dental hygienist in the school, and he want to borrow, you not he want to use our dental office to do the training for the hygienist. So if we rent the dental office like on Sunday or Saturday, let him to do the training for the for the local hygienist. So what's the liability problem for us?
Well, anytime a doctor is going to allow use of their office for another group, another entity, another educating body, anything like that, whoever's in charge of that, there needs to be some type of written agreement that spells out the liabilities and how, certain aspects of that are going to be handled. There's nothing wrong with that. It's more about working it out ahead of time. It could be a situation where if something goes wrong, then the patient, let's say they're the ones that bring some type of lawsuit or a complaint, they're going to sue everybody and ask questions later, right? So any issues about liabilities between the practice owner and the folks that are coming in, that needs to be worked out ahead of time in writing. And I've actually done that in similar situations, including in the last month. I actually put together an agreement like that for a doctor who was allowing a dental assisting school to come in and use his practice just on the weekends. And it wasn't complicated, but it addressed many of these same issues.
Oh, that's great. So but you are in the Texas. So
Yes.
if I need somebody, to write those type of agreement, can you write it for us?
What state are you in?
North Carolina.
North Carolina. So I have doctors contact me from all over the country, on an annual basis. What I tell them is, on the one hand, I'm not licensed in your jurisdiction, but on the other hand, I can provide information as long as you understand that I'm not held to the laws of your state. I can give you things or make things available to you that may be helpful, but to get the final word on the legality of it, you would have to go to an attorney in your state. So given that, the information that I have, is that still helpful for you? Because if you still need to see a lawyer in your state to get it looked at and approved and reviewed in your jurisdiction, you might be better off starting with an attorney in your jurisdiction. Sometimes the answer is yes, and sometimes the answer is no, we'll take what you got. It just depends on a case-by-case basis.
All right, thank you. Yeah, good to know. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. I think
Thank you, Dr. Shepherd. Thank you for sharing these important information for us.
Did Lena have a question?
Yes, I do have a question, Dr.
Can we
Shepherd.
take one more? Can we take one more? Because she's been waiting.
Yes,
Oh,
thank you.
sorry.
Thank you, Dr. Shepherd. I've been listening to your Zoom class for a moment, and because I'm a newcomer, just about to enter dental business, and basically for the doctor's responsibilities, I just heard for patients negligence. So we could basically just use consent form and medical history record form to indemnify doctors of the patient side negligence. Is that correct?
Well, consent forms and medical history forms are part of the record keeping, but a defense against a negligence claim it's helpful to have the forms. You need to have the forms that you're supposed to have for compliance.
Okay.
But for example, let's say that I'm your patient and you are going to do an extraction and you give me the informed consent for extractions
Mhm.
and I read it, understand it, ask questions, you answer my questions and I sign off and we have a great informed consent discussion. And then during the course of that extraction, which was supposed to be tooth number 16, inadvertently you extract tooth number 1.
Okay. But that's the doctor's negligence. That's
Right,
not.
that's the doctor's negligence, and the informed consent is not going to help you there. I don't know if that's, so what is your question exactly?
So that's, and if it's doctor's side negligence, it's called malpractice, right? So
Yes,
we can only rely on our insurance.
right, well, so then you have insurance that's going to now, if I bring a lawsuit because you extracted the wrong tooth and it caused further problems, I'm gonna hire a lawyer, bring a lawsuit, and now you will contact your insurance company and they will provide legal counsel to act on your behalf to provide a defense against my lawsuit. That's what your insurance is for.
Okay, I got it. Just want to clarify patient side and doctor side.
Oh, sure. Thank
Got it.
you. Good question.
Yeah, I do have another question. I think it's same as another the listener just
Go
asked.
ahead.
Because you are based in Texas, Houston.
Yes.
If we do have other practice in other states, you do not cover other states, but you do recommend your network to us.
Yes. I mean, if you've got an issue, you can contact me through my website. And then I can guide you as best I can, either to another attorney or how to go about looking for one.
All right. Thank you. You've answered my question fully, helpfully. Thank you.
Dr. Zhang?
Hey,
Yes,
Dr.
I
Shepherd.
thought you have a question.
Yeah, no, I just want to say thank you, Dr. Shepherd. I've been your fan for over the years, ever since I stopped practice. That's why I bring you to this group. Seems like you are the superstar. We never draw that crowd at the Friday night. But once again, thank you so much.
Yeah.
And also, I would recommend everybody for Dr. Shepherd's Q&A session. Although it's very early in the morning, 7 o'clock Texas time, I have to get up early before go to work. But he pretty much answer all the questions you may have. So once again, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Dr.
thank
Ray.
you,
I
Dr.
appreciate it.
Shepherd.
Yeah.
I put your website, the Legal Dental, into the group. If any the other have any question, want to attend to the meeting, go there. And good evening. Okay, I try to announce next Friday we have another speaker to talking about the DSO. Okay, this is the speaker Shi Xiaolong here. Okay, and I hope our doctor here to attend this meeting. It will be very exciting. You know, right now the DSO is a big things for our practice. Okay, here is a private practice of DSO. This is a question. Okay, I think next Friday, Mr. Xu will be answer this question and also give us the solution for that. Okay, thank you, doctors. Thank you. Thank you, Dr.
Shepherd. Have a nice weekend.
Good. Everybody have a good night. Okay, bye.